If you're in the Louisiana swamps, the rougarou, a tall, terrifying, bloodthirsty creature, could appear before you at any moment. He stalks through the sugarcane fields, looking for food. When he finds something, he rips it apart, drinks its blood, and turns it into a beast from another world. Even if you don't think he's real, you might want to stay away from him just in case. There are stories about a tribe of shape-shifting cannibals who moved deep into the woods and slowly lost touch with their humanity. A group of people who turned into something much darker, a skinwalker. People are now seeing the rougarou again, almost 400 years after the first stories about it started to spread. Does the rougarou still live in the southern Louisiana swamps? The truth might shock you. This video will take you through real-life encounters with the terrifying creature, the rougarou. So without further ado, let's get into the video. When armor, swords, and jousting were common, there was much more to fear than the plague and witches. The word lougarou, which means werewolf in French, was also used to describe a type of beast known all over the country. Back in the 1600s, lougarou were often blamed for different crimes. It looks like that was a thing back then. Your house may have been broken into during the night, a lougarou. Did a child vanish without a trace from the village? No doubt a lougarou. The villagers would catch people they thought were lougarou and then put them on trial in front of the entire village. Usually, they would find someone acting strange in the woods or village. The court would ask the public if they thought the accused was a lougarou. Most people said yes, mainly because they didn't want to be discovered as witches or lougarou themselves. Many people in the country feared these lougarou, so they became stories told to children. The French Catholics said that if you didn't follow the rules of Lent for 7 years in a row, you would turn into a lougarou. Children were also told that if they didn't do what their parents asked, a lougarou would come in the middle of the night and take them away. The legend of the lougarou followed many French people who moved to Canada and the southern United States. Here are 2 allegedly true stories of people who actually met the beast. In the words of a teenage girl who met the rougarou, her story goes like this. My grandmother's farm was situated on 15 acres, and we drove there several times a year, mainly in the summer. I respected my grandmother more than any person on earth, but she was not without her quirks, the strangest of which was her insistence that we follow 3 specific rules when we visited. I can remember her pulling my sister and me close, kissing us on the forehead, and gently reminding us about them each time we arrived, her frail and wrinkled hands cradling ours. Don't leave food outside. No singing after dark. And most importantly, never go into the woods alone. She never explained why they were important, only that they were. One evening, when my sister was about 3 or 4 years old, she accidentally left some food outside. Having finished mine, I went inside to get something to drink, and she followed me, leaving her plate behind. We were telling stories and laughing in front of the fireplace later that night when we heard something scratching at the back door. She glanced at our father sitting on the floor, and I felt her body tense up. Dad tried to keep his face blank, but I could see the worry creeping through. "Grandma, what's that?" I asked. "Probably just a raccoon," my father said, standing up. "Wait, let me," Grandma said as she went to the back of the house. She returned to the den and sat down while holding my sister's empty plate from earlier. My sister looked at the plate and then at my grandmother's face. The look on my grandmother's face made my sister burst into tears. "It's okay," Grandmother said, hugging my sister tightly. "Let's try not to do this again. Okay?" After the food incident, I started to think my grandmother was hiding something. My last visit to my grandmother's farm was the summer I turned 16. It was the summer when my grandmother finally told me about the secret she had kept for so long. Like most 16-year-olds, I was defiant. I was tired of her seemingly arbitrary rules, especially the third one. Never go into the woods? What was I, 5? By then, I was bored at the farm and wanted to explore the woods I had been forbidden to enter. I eventually did. I followed the creek through her property's corner into the woods on a hot summer day. I took off my shoes and walked along the creek's sandy bank, listening to the water rush around sticks and stones and the birds and insects around me. When I had traveled so far into the woods that I could no longer see the tree line, I realized the woods had become eerily silent, with only the sound of the water. There was an eerie silence in the air, and it made me feel uneasy. I quickly turned around and returned to the farmhouse because I remembered my grandmother's warnings and was afraid I had been there too long. I stopped when I heard a branch crack behind me. I kept walking, afraid to look back. I heard it again after a few steps. Someone was moving through dense underbrush toward me. I slowly turned and saw what scared me to death. I saw a lumbering beast approaching through the forest. It was over 6 feet tall and mostly resembled a man, but its dark head had large, pointed ears. Despite its head being in darkness, I could see its large, yellow eyes staring at me. I stumbled backward, fell into the sandy water, then turned and ran through the woods, sprinting over rocks, pine cones, and briars. I didn't even stop to get my shoes. After slamming and locking the farmhouse's door, I ran inside to find my grandmother. She only asked, "Were you in the woods?" "I'm sorry, Grandma, I didn't know there was a thing." I stammered, unsure of what to say. My foot was bleeding, and once she had bandaged it up, she began to tell me a story. "What you saw was the Lougarou. It's also called a rougarou here in Louisiana. Your grandpa discovered a completely dismembered animal on one of his hunting trips. He hunted the bear he thought caused it and found its den deep in the forest. It was no bear though. According to your grandfather, it was a man with long, dark hair and a wolf's head. Your grandfather won but was severely injured. He became ill several hours after returning that night. That night, he wailed and moaned, and in the morning, his eyes had sunken into his head, and his body hair had grown long and black. He disappeared a few hours later. He probably realized what was happening and didn't want to endanger me. The thing you saw today in the woods was your grandfather. If you did manage to kill him, I'm afraid you'd end up like your grandfather. If the old stories are true, the person who kills a rougarou will become one." When it happened, I was a senior in high school and about to graduate. I grew up in a small town where very few people leave. Most of the people who are born there also die there. I wanted more, wanted to leave, and saw college as my way out. My family was upset when I got a full scholarship to a state university 3 hours away. My hard work had finally paid off, and I started spending my days dreaming of life and a future far from the simple ways of the bayou. One afternoon after school, I was relaxing in my boat as the sun went down. I was looking at the clouds, listening to the frogs croak, and daydreaming as the slow current of the bayou carried me home. I was in a daze when I heard a loud splash, which woke me up. I quickly looked at the water around the boat to see if any ripples indicated an alligator was nearby. Gators are usually harmless, but they often splash around our boats. If we leave them alone, they will, for the most part, leave us alone. This time, though, I only saw flat water. It didn't look like there were any alligators nearby. Lots of animals live in the swamp, so I started to calm down again, thinking it was probably just a snake looking for food that fell from a tree into the water. But then I heard a quick series of staccato splashes, and when I turned around, I saw what could only have been a rougarou. The bayou's water came up to its hips, just below its waist, while the water would be up to my chest. It had hairy, long arms, and the look on its face made me want to scream. Large, soulful black eyes were tucked under hairy ears and above a flat snout with two large, yellowed canine teeth hanging crookedly out of its mouth. Before I could scream, the beast put its massive hand over my mouth and stopped me from making a sound. Then it pushed me down to the floor of my boat and used its feet to hold me there. I was scared and sure it would eat me, just like in the stories I'd heard my whole life. I'm not going to lie, I was scared to death. So much so that I peed on myself while shaking and crying. I wish I could say I fought bravely that day, but that's not what happened. I couldn't move because I was so scared and couldn't even start fighting back. I was pinned down when I heard the familiar sound of my backpack's zipper unzipping. Then I felt my weight shift as I listened to the beast inhale deeply, one long, loud sniff. Most of my belongings were then strewn about the inside of the boat, landing everywhere. My calculus textbook smacked me across the brow, drawing blood. I heard a crinkling sound as the rougarou leaped into the water with incredible speed and agility. When it reached the shore, it ran into the distance, was engulfed by the thick swamp vegetation, and vanished. I tried to compose myself for who knows how long. I then rinsed my pants in the bayou water, hoping to wash away the stench of urine and the shame I felt at my cowardly reaction. When I finally stopped shaking and began repacking my backpack, I had a realization. There was only one thing missing. The rougarou had only taken one thing. My snack had vanished. I eventually calmed down and returned home after the sun had gone down. I let my father scold me for being late, and no one noticed the cut on my brow. After that day, I gave up floating the bayou alone and never saw the rougarou again. As planned, I graduated from high school and moved away to college. Leaving the bayou has been everything I could have hoped for and more. I go back to see my family every year around the holidays. I still hear the old rougarou stories when I go home, but now they are being told to a new generation of Cajun kids. I've never told a single person what happened that day. Not one. Some stories are best left untold. That's it for today. Let us know your thoughts in the comment section. Be sure to smash the thumbs up button and subscribe for more future content. Thank you for watching and hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned for the next one.